this.
Camera, action.
Oh, it's live. Okay, good. So, welcome everybody, especially everybody here, but also, dang it. Hello everyone watching online, as well as here. We have a very special guest. This is so funny. We have like maybe 10 people that join us every weekend online. And so anyways, yeah, welcome everybody. Come on up to the front. If you're watching us online, we want to thank you so much for watching us. Joel's here, and Joel's going to share some really good music. He's going to start with one song. But before we even start, I thought it'd be fun. Some of you know Joel. And so I want you just to say, like, maybe a couple, like, one or two words real quick about what you love about Joel, because I love this guy, and I want him to know he's welcome here. You can be fully free and be you in whatever kind of music you bring us. We're just thrilled to have you. Anybody? Joel. I wish Mornell was here right now. I'll start. Joel has been one of those people who, every time I've heard him up front and seen him do music, I just feel connected. He has this warm presence that just kind of pulls you in. And when we went, Leo and I went to the House of Blues to watch you, I really felt like, oh, you're just inviting us into like a living room and just like a family thing where we can like feel the music and be a part of it. That's something I appreciate about you. Your smile helps with that a little bit. He's got that smile. Anything else that you know, Joel? I know, that's what I'm excited about. I'm waiting for like a story or something.
I've known Joel for a long time, I don't know, close to 15 years, I guess. And it's cool, I haven't seen him in over a year, probably, maybe 2 years. And it's like I seen him yesterday.
Nice.
He's family to us. He's not just a friend, he's family for life. So it's one of those guys that you don't see him for a long time, but it's like I just finished talking to him.
He looks...
He's usually the one that's late, and today we're late. So
nice. Yeah, how's that feel? Walk in and we're the ones running late. Awesome. Let's just start. Joel, come on up and let's just do a song.
Ethos, how you guys doing? All right. Well, Pastor Tony didn't mention, but I have a stage name, Swells. I go by, and that's actually derived from my first name, which is Cioli. So I'm a singer-songwriter, and this is one of the songs that I've written. Hope you guys like it. Actually, does anybody in here know how to whistle? No whistlers? No? Okay, never mind. Well, the song is called It's Your Love. I need something to help soothe my mind from the everyday stresses of life, or when I don't have the strength to fight. I need something to help ease this pain inside when things aren't going my way. Instead of being black and white, it's more like gray. I need something. I'm not talking medicinal, but something more spiritual. It's a love that I need, an unending love that I need. I feel love, and I feel for your love. Your love is all that I need. Ooh. I also need a little Vicks, a little coffee, and a little hot tea this morning. Want that thing I need. I want the thing that people envy. It's like a friend of me, a remedy. It can be my everything. I'm a helpless So without him, like a dry, my soul would just be dry without him. I need something. Hey, I forgot my own lyrics. Hey. I'm gonna take it back right here. I want the thing that people envy. It's like a friend of me, a remedy. It can't be my everything. I'm a helpless mess without him. Like a dry, my soul would just be dry without him. Woo. Baby, come over here. Give me your everything. It's the love that I need. Learning the love that I need. I feel love, and I feel for your love. Your love is all that I need. Do-do-do-do-do. 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 It's the love that I need. That's it.
Where can we find you online? Nowhere, actually. What? Come on. Spotify, Swells on Spotify, iTunes, all that fun stuff. Okay. You're going to get like at least 10 sales after today. Nice. I still haven't gotten a t-shirt from you. I need to get one. I know, I was so sad. All right, well, everyone welcome again. I feel like this should work. Leo, I don't know if this is not working. Oh, there we go. Is it working, or is it Joe that's okay, good. We have been doing oh, hi Joe. Yeah. We've been doing this series over Epic, understanding these stories. And so for many of us, we grew up with like the flood story, or we grew up with a guy that was swallowed by a whale, right? We grew up with these stories where the waters part. And for many of us, we heard that we should believe those things literally happened. But the other stories from other people, those didn't, because our magic is good, their magic is bad. Anyone with me? Anyone hear those stories? Anyone ever wonder, like, well, how did the day actually, like, how did time actually stand still in the story of Joshua? Did it really stand still? Also, the story goes that the sun was what? Rotating around the earth. And then Galileo says, no, the earth rotates around the sun. And you wonder, did Joshua just get it confused? What do you do when stuff like that comes up? And so we've been talking about the meaning behind the stories. We've said maybe sometimes literalism sometimes falls apart, but the point is not whether it did or didn't, it's that it does. And so time stands still for some of us. We talked about that yesterday. And what do you do in the middle of moments where time stands still? Well, you learn to be fully present in it, right? Did anyone practice that this week, learning to be present to the good things around them? Nobody. I failed you last week. Okay. Yeah, so maybe practice that today. Maybe after today, learn to be, or just stop and say, this is really good. When you're walking with that special someone, maybe put your phone away and just like really be with them. When you're eating that food, don't try to just gulp it down, but try to enjoy it. Like say, what is this I'm actually, oh, these are eggs. And that's God's gift to the world, bacon. I should enjoy this thing. Yeah, that's what we do. We enjoy the thing. We're present to it. Before we begin, we're going to talk about some things today, but I want to ask you to do this. Many people, they'll ask me as we've moved through this question, they always are beginning to say, well, what about Jesus? How do we read the stories of Jesus when he does miraculous things? What do we do with those? Especially when sometimes they don't add up scientifically or how we view the world. They don't seem to fit. And so right now, what I want you to do is turn to the person next to you, and all I'd like you to do is just say, here is my favorite story of Jesus. Like reading these stories, this is the one that kind of connected to me most growing up or the last couple of years. This is the story. Don't recount the whole story because that's going to take way longer than 3 minutes, right? But just recount the one story. This is the story I liked, and this is why I liked it. Can you guys do that? Okay, well, you're going to do it anyways because I'm asking. Good. All right, so turn to the people next to you. One story that this was the story, the Jesus story that stuck out most to me. Go for it. We're sponsored by Perrier today. I drink it every day. All right. What was your favorite story? What is your favorite Jesus story? Anybody? When he helps the blind man see. Nice. Okay, good. Anyone else? 40 days, 40 nights, not eating, sweating blood. Got it. Did you forget about that part? He's like, holy crap, I don't remember blood. I remember sweating blood. Okay, good. What else? Anyone else? Okay, healing people. Nice. Anyone else? Water into wine. Good. I grew up with the idea that it was grape juice, right? It wasn't grape juice.
I had an original one and I changed my mind.
Oh, okay.
My original one was when he's on the cross, because I think that kind of sums up his whole ministry. Basically, he said, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, you know? And
Well, that's, yeah.
teaches us all, like, you know, no matter how bad the situation is, even if you're dying on the cross, you're just getting murdered, you know, they don't know what the heck they're doing. So we don't know what's in people's minds to judge them, so whatever. Leave them alone, they don't know what the heck they're doing. But right now, I was just thinking, this is actually my favorite now. When he raised Lazarus from the dead, he's like, hey, wake up!
Right? He comes out like mummified. Yeah, good.
Not laying hands on him or anything, he's just like,
Yeah.
wake up!
Dude, get up. Yeah. All right, good. Anyone else? Stories of Jesus. Walking on water, that was my jam. I like that one. Okay, cool. Here's the question that many people ask me, especially the last month as we've been moving through these. If these stories in the Older Testament, the older, as if there was like old and oldest. In the Old Testament, you have like a lot of oral traditions that are gathered. And again, like any story, it builds, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so again, how do we then read Jesus, right? How many of you have thought that as we've moved through this series? Anybody? Yeah, well, I know some of you have because you've talked to me, but yeah, good. So here's the thing. I'm going to give you some history. Are you guys okay with me sharing a little bit of history today? I don't want to bore you, but I'm going to drop some knowledge bombs on you. And here's the beautiful thing about the group we have today. Just speak up. If you hear something, you're like, oh, but wait, what about this? Or hey, I totally agree with you. You're great. You can say all those things. Okay? So, especially the last one. So that'll be kind of the fun of what we can do today. So here's the thing. The Gospels, like Jesus grew up in a time era, that first century, when they are under Roman occupation. And the Romans were like the largest group. This was the largest civilization. They were taking over everything. And so Rome got bigger and bigger and bigger. And actually they got so big that it became a problem. They couldn't keep everything. And so they are under Roman occupation. The Romans are very Greek in the way they view the world, but they're also really militaristic. And so everything is about strength, force, yet they also have room for like art and philosophy, and they're the ones building, sewer systems and that kind of stuff. This is a really amazing culture, the Romans. So this is what Jesus is growing up in, and they are essentially captive people. They've been taken over, and now they have to they have to live by Rome's rules. They can be free to worship as long as it doesn't interfere with Rome. Does that make sense? So you're free as long as you don't make us angry or do something we don't like, then you're in trouble. And oftentimes trouble means you would be hung on a cross if you raised a riot, right? You would be tortured, you would be punished, whatever the thing was. That was Roman rule. That's what the Jewish people were under. And so Jesus is often portrayed like this. How many of you grew up with that Jesus? White, middle-aged, handsome, always a beard, always well-trimmed beard, right? That's Jesus. That was the Jesus I grew up with. That was him on the felt board. That's not really what he would have looked like. He was a Middle Eastern rabbi. How many of you have ever been to the Middle East? These guys are tourists. Like, this is what Jesus would have looked like. Jesus was a Middle Eastern rabbi. He was Jewish. And so many people don't understand, again, because he was Jewish, that means to understand the stories and to understand Jesus, you probably need to know something about Judaism. Make sense? And so to understand Judaism is to understand the stories, to understand the history, to understand the background. So Jesus would have been a Jewish rabbi. He would have looked something like this, maybe without the tank top. Jesus would have looked something like that. What happens, though, in 70 AD, about 40 years later after the death, the crucifixion of Jesus, and what we have is their temple is destroyed because a bunch of Jewish people decide we're going to rise up and we're going to take back Jerusalem. And so in 68 AD, they rose up, they violently overthrew their Roman captors, and they took back Jerusalem for about 2 years. What do you think Rome's response is going to be? Yeah, not happy, right? So they come in and they literally murder women, children, old people, young people. It didn't matter. They were murdered there. And they said if you did not run to the hills, if you didn't run to the hills, you were not safe. And so they also not a brick was left standing. And so that actually happened to those people. And here's the really interesting thing is just after that experience is when the first gospel is written. Anyone catch that? So 40 years after Jesus, Mark is written, the first gospel. So in the middle of brokenness, in the middle of pain, is your response going to be to write a history book? Why not? Why isn't the first thing after you're in the middle of some kind of brokenness, you're like, I got to write down a detailed description of this event? Well, let me ask you a better question. What do you typically do when something bad happens, like catastrophe? What do you typically do? Cry, mourn, go through the thing? Yeah. And then what you'll find is we begin to pick up the stories, right? The stories that bring hope, challenge, they bring some kind of peace to the situation and give us some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, right? And that is why you'll see the stories, the details, everything about Jesus. Mark, the first gospel, tries to put that all together and shares it with those people who just lost everything. Family, friends, their temple, many of their homes, they lost everything. And Mark, the Gospel of Mark, is shared with those people to say, there is new life just around the corner. Don't give up. How did that land for you just hearing that, by the way? What'd you think? Heavy. First Gospel, Mark, that's how it was written, why it's written, when it's written. Yeah. Okay, good. Let me keep moving. So understand this, Israel is not writing history. The writer is not writing history. They're bringing messages of hope to people. If we don't want to end up in the same place, maybe we don't violently revolt. We don't use eye for an eye anymore. Maybe we learn to live in peace right here first. Those are the messages they're given. And here's some other interesting things about them. They had a view of the world in two different ways. There was the law and there was the prophets. And so they had two individuals that were really important to them. They had Moses and Elijah. And these two figures were like central for them. And so in our culture today, when you talk about America, what images come up for you? An eagle, right? Okay, good. Did you know that they actually tried to make the turkey the bird of yeah, that was actually like for a while Benjamin Franklin tried to get the turkey to be the bird. I'm glad he chose an eagle. Okay, when you talk about the Republicans, what image? Be nice. An elephant, right? What about the Democrats? An ass, a donkey. So whether, and again, I couldn't care less. I'm right in the middle. But we all have these images, and they kind of move us in the way that we view the world, and oftentimes kind of shape how we have communication with each other. For them, it was the law and the prophets. So here's the thing. Jesus, the message of Jesus is this: I am both the law and the prophets. I'm going to sum up all of it in what I do and what I share. And so everything that you see Jesus share, all the miracles, all the stories, everything is going to share that he is summing up the law and the prophets. Okay, I'm giving you so much heavy stuff here. Are we okay so far? I promise I'll get to some good things in a second, but this, I feel like you need to know it. So here we go. For them, in that first era, this is the chapter and verses they were reading, because they were looking for, when are we going to experience freedom again, wholeness again? When do we get life back after all of that brokenness, all that pain? When do we get to experience freedom? And so they picked up this chapter and verse from Isaiah. Isaiah was not writing about Jesus, by the way. The writer, the actual person behind it is Hezekiah, and he's sharing with his people after Babylonian exile. He's saying, someday, freedom, new life is going to look like this. And here's what he says it looks like. And I'm going to skip probably until we go to be strong. Be strong, do not fear. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. With divine retribution, he will come to save you. Now watch this. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame will leap like a deer, and the mute tongue will shout for joy. So as Mark is writing this, he is looking at that, because that's what they're talking about. So why do you suppose the miracle stories are so important in the Gospels? Okay, yeah, we're looking for freedom, we're looking for hope, we're looking for new life. It was actually here and we missed it. Like we missed it. We went right back to eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of response to violence. We missed it. It was here the whole time. And here's what it looked like. Yeah? Okay. Okay. So everyone say tikkun olam. That means repairing the world. I used to think the kingdom of heaven was like some far off space up there on an asteroid. And someday I would get there if I did enough good things and avoided bad things. The kingdom of heaven that Jesus speaks of was actually a present reality we live right here, right now, where I begin to live in a place where nothing's missing, nothing's broken. That's what the word peace actually means, shalom. And so we begin to live that right here, right now. Is it perfect? Well, no, that's not life. That's not reality. But we live to live. We move toward this kind of reality. And so when I'm in a relationship or when I'm talking to someone or when I'm on Facebook, I do my best to bring tikkun olam to the conversation. We do our best. We fail miserably sometimes, but we do our best. Tikkun olam. That's the destination we're moving toward. And so, again, the blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the good news is preached to the poor. That's exactly what Matthew says will happen. Who is he quoting? He's quoting Isaiah. He's saying the exact same thing Isaiah is saying because he wants you to know this whole thing we've been looking for is summed up in Jesus. Good? Okay, so here we go. All right, how many of you have ever read the birth narrative and you thought, well, that was fun? Did you ever have any questions about the birth narrative? What kind of questions surfaced for you when you read about the story of the birth? And I'm going to go quickly through most of these because it's a pretty miraculous story. Anyone? Okay, good. Yeah. All the other babies murdered, but just one. And that reminds you of what story? Moses. Yeah. Much of what you see in the birth story is going to be kind of a connection to what happened with Moses and David and Elijah, the prophets, right? And the kings. Everyone getting this so far? So again, the birth narrative, they don't agree. The two different stories don't always agree. One says there were shepherds. One says, no, there were actually these wise men. One says there was a star. The other completely disregards it. One says there was a bunch of murders of babies, right? The other doesn't even have that in there. Why the discrepancies? What's going on here? The beauty of this narrative is this, and this is what I love about it. Even, by the way, even the word Alma, which we've used as virgin, can I just screw with you for a minute? The word virgin, it actually just means young woman. What do you do with that? I'm just throwing this out at you, and you do what you want with it. But interesting stuff. So people will argue day and night. Did this literally happen or not? Was there an actual star that hung over this house or not? Were the two gospel writers, were they confused? Did they get it wrong? Why is that there is no documentation of Herod actually murdering a bunch of kids? Why? What do you do with it? Here's the beauty of what I see with this. Again, the birth narrative, you are sharing the story right when your people just lost everything. What does a new birth in a family do for the family, for the relatives, for everyone around? What is it? Okay, good. Joy, excitement. It brings new life. Start the narrative with a birth story. A reminder that there is new life unfolding right before our eyes. And for many of us, we have to search for it. Do you guys see it? In those moments of pain and brokenness, maybe there's a gentle reminder that there's new birth just waiting on the other side of it, if you're willing to look hard enough. Good. Any comments on that birth narrative and that element of it, that aspect of it, the miraculous birth? By the way, as I'm saying this, I'm looking around and I know there are people in this room that see it totally different. Does that land okay for you? Some people are like, yeah, that didn't happen like that. Couldn't have. Other people are like, no, it absolutely must have. But I love that we can sit here together and be okay with it. Or there's people in the middle that are like, well, maybe it's a little bit of both. Beautiful. And then there's Steve, who has his own opinion. Yeah, I don't care. It's a cool story. Yeah, good. Yeah. So let me keep going. So that's one of the first places people often go with me, and I get this all the time from people. Well, what about the birth story? What do you do with this? What do you do with Jesus? I say this, beautiful, beautiful way to introduce Jesus and a hopeful message for people who just lost everything. When Danielle and I lost everything, when we left a certain place, isn't it interesting that just a couple of months later, Brooklyn is like in the belly, like in the womb. Interesting that would just happen. We still don't know how it happened. It just happened. It just happened. New birth. Yeah. Oh. Here's another one. Anyone ever wonder this question, like, after the time, Jesus is born, how come you never hear about his teenage years? Why don't they tell that detail? Because I feel like as a teenager, that would have been helpful. Yeah. Christopher Moore wrote a book called Lamb. I feel like you should read it. Probably the most funny and blasphemous book you'll ever read about Jesus' teenage years, the years in between. He just creates this really fictional story about, like, well, maybe he did this and this and this. Did Jesus, like, ever have impure thoughts about girls? Because I remember I did. Like, what do I do with that? And I remember thinking, well, Jesus never did. I'm like, crap, well, I'm in trouble. What do you do with this and this and this? The teenage years aren't there. They're just missing. And so we skip all of that and we go right to this moment where Jesus says, I think I'm going to wander in the wilderness for 40 days. I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to drink, and I'm going to be tempted by the devil. How many of you have ever thought that a strange thing to start your, journey? I'm about to start a new job. I'm going to take off into the wilderness and fight a bear and not eat for 40 days. Why is this, does anyone question this growing up?
It was positive and negative for me because you see the positive of, oh yeah, he resisted Satan. Oh yeah, he whatever. Oh. But then also negatively because I also saw it as him questioning his own self, that he had to go test himself,
Yeah, why would you test yourself? Yeah. Good. As a Jewish person, here's what you're reading. As a Jewish person, your people, they were in the wilderness for how many years? 40 years. The number 40, again, we've talked about this. If you were to walk, again, from Egypt to Canaan, it would take you about 15 days. If you were to line up all the Israelites from Egypt to Canaan, they would be able to hold hands there and a quarter of the way back. That's weird, right? Why would it take you 40 years? 40 days would seem like a long time. 40 years? It's like right over there. Like, how do you miss that? Tony could get there. Like, that is right there. There's beauty to the number 40. Again, it's a time of learning and unlearning. It's about starting the thing new. It's about taking the past, learning from it, and walking in the new thing. And so for Jesus, it's interesting that Jesus will, of course, they'll have Jesus go through the wilderness. They'll tell of Jesus going through the wilderness, having the exact same temptations Moses had, all three. Read about that later. It'll blow your mind. Jesus will go through the very same thing that the Israelites had to go through in the desert. Why do you think that's important? If you're in the middle of brokenness, you lost your temple, why would that message be important to you right now? Hope. Yeah. Anyone ever get caught up in a bunch of really vicious cycles from your past? Anyone ever feel like, I grew up with this and I cannot seem to break it? I grew up with this structure and it just follows me everywhere I go, right? I can't seem to break it. The hope for them is this. We keep falling over and over and over again into captivity and losing everything. But there's hope that something is going to change soon. Something's going to break forth. Something's coming. And so for them, when they read this, they were not asking the question, yeah, but did he really do it? For them, they were saying, oh, yeah, there's hope. There's hope, and we're going to learn and unlearn certain things from this experience. It's going to be good. One of my favorites. First miracle Jesus does is turning water into wine. And I grew up in a culture where they tried to tell you that it was grape juice. It's grape juice, Tony. Wasn't wine. During communion, it's Welch's. Wine is bad. Alcohol is evil. No, right? That's what I grew up with. I actually took time to study this. Like, what a waste of time, by the way, to prove this. I took time to research this for like months, and I realized there's only one word for wine, and it's oinos. It means wine. No one there was drinking grapefruit. First off, I would challenge you to get some grapes from an actual vineyard, not like the grapes you get at the store. Get wine grapes, smash those mothers up, make yourself a little, and drink it, and just see how that tastes to you. It's terrible. You need it to ferment. It needs to become alcoholic so it actually tastes good. It has natural sugars that happen when it is fermented. Yeah? How many of you just felt like, I'm free? Thank the Lord. I can finally pull out the wine bottle when mom and dad come visit. I finally did that the other day. It felt so freeing. Water into wine. So, interesting story because for a Jewish person, again, it's blowing their minds. For us today, we're like, well, how do you do water into wine? I keep doing it. There's nothing working. I'm praying. I'm doing all these things. Like in a magical show. Will Copperfield come and do it? How do you change water into wine? For them, it wasn't even, they saw this, and here's what they would hone in on, and this is what all the rabbis years later would discuss. There are 6 stone jars. And for them, 6 stone jars filled with water, what they would do is they would go and they would purify themselves before they could partake in any kind of ceremony. Because they felt that even just interacting with Gentiles made them unclean. So they had to purify themselves before they could be fully whole, right? Fully holy Jewish people who could partake in celebration. So here's what Jesus does. He looks at the communion glasses, the little ones going around with Welch's, and he's like, screw that. And he fills it up with vodka. That's what that would have felt like to the Jewish people. Forget that. I'm filling this up with real stuff. He fills it up, and what he does is instead of doing this with water, he has them basically, he pours new wine into it. And it's the very best wine. And what's interesting about this is it's saying the old way that we did things doesn't work anymore. The old way, the old idea that we're better than everyone else, that we this and this and this, that doesn't work anymore. There's a new way of viewing it, and it's right here. How'd that land for you? The old way does not work. It needs something new.
With some old attached to it, though, because
Sure, there was water.
in the whole scenario there, Mary was the catalyst. He didn't even want to do it. He struggled. He said, "No, that's not my time yet." Whatever. And she said, "No, do it." So here's a guy supposedly that can resist temptation from the devil himself, but his mom tells him to do something, and he's going to do it even though
Mom said, I got to do it now.
saying, "This is not my time. I don't want to do this. It's not."
Yeah.
So he seizes that opportunity because of her, or is she the catalyst, or is she really carrying it out or starting his ministry?
Yeah, so I don't know. I wasn't there. And none of the writers seemed to be interested in that answer, to be honest with you. What they were interested in was spending some time talking about 6 stone water jars. Like they put that specific detail in there. And there's not a lot of specific details. There's not like a lot of names of the wedding party, any of those things, because it wasn't history. It wasn't important. The important thing was there's some interesting symbolism going on, and there's some interesting actions that would probably make a lot of people angry, and a lot of Jewish people would have been like, whoa, you just You just turned our purification water into wine. So the thing that we would do before the celebration, it just becomes a celebration. We stop doing these things in order to feel like we can celebrate, and we just start celebrating. We stop trying to live up to the thing, and we just start living it. Did that hit anyone? Because it just did me as it came out of my mouth. Here's how this is how it's worked for me. I left Seventh-day Adventism, and I started eating better. I left Seventh-day Adventism, and I started to actually take seriously having rest time to remind myself I'm not a machine. I stopped doing the thing because I thought I had to, and I started doing some things because I wanted to. And the things that no longer worked, I was like, peace. The things that did, I actually found myself enjoying and like fully embracing them now. I eat more of like a vegan lifestyle. I eat more of that, even though I just had a piece of bacon a few minutes ago. It's like not my typical food. But I just find myself wanting to be healthy, though I left the thing behind. Anyone with me on that? Yeah. Here's another one. How many of you have ever read this story and said, wow, that's amazing? He feeds 5,000 people, and that was only, the 5,000 was only the men. It only counted the men. So again, add another 5 and then maybe another 20 for kids, I don't know. You got a lot of people there, right? Take that story to the extreme, and this is pretty miraculous. There's a lot of bread and fish going around, right? What's interesting is when you read the story, though, Mark and John, they say it happened twice. Did you know that? There were 2 feedings of 5,000, according to Mark and John. And the interesting thing is the 2 different stories happen in 2 different locations. There's a different number of people, different number of loaves, all of those details. If you were trying to write history, wouldn't you want to get that right? But it seems that the writers weren't really that interested in those details. It was actually the story that was more important. One of the writers has it happen in the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and the other has it happen at the very end. Again, they weren't all that interested in the details being perfect. A bunch of people who are basically immigrants, who are treated really poorly. They come together because they're broken, they're scared, and they bring what they can. And that just seems to multiply. Where have you heard that story before? Anyone ever heard of the fabricated story of the first Thanksgiving? It's beautiful until you look into who Columbus was and all that stuff. But it's beautiful, isn't it? Anyone ever have those moments where you invite some people over and you say, Steve, bring chips. Joe, bring hot dogs. Joel, bring this. And before you know it, you hosted it and everyone left, and now you have a week's worth of leftovers? How did that happen? It shouldn't have happened because you asked for only this, but how it happened is Steve actually realized, oh, I've got some extra beans. And then he also, made a 5-course meal to bring as well. And everyone brought what they had, and when everyone comes together and gives what they can, there's a miraculous moment where there's more than enough. I think the thing that happens in our country when tragedy takes place, we live in a place of scarcity. And that idea that blessings are scarce, we freak out and we begin to grab everything we can. Ever wonder why after a hurricane or something, people are looting stores? It's a weird thing, but we're freedom, and we go and break into stores and we steal everything. Why do we do that? What would a real human thing be to do for our community in the middle of a tragedy, rather than breaking into our community owners' stores and stealing all their stuff? What would a positive thing be to do? Okay. Hey, you guys have water over there? I've got some. Oh, awesome. Do you have any rice? I could use something. We're out of food. Like there's a difference in the middle of tragedy. Is there abundance or is there scarcity? And what the story says, again, in the middle of their tragedy, in the middle of their brokenness, is there's actually abundance everywhere if you'll just look. And when we come together, the abundance is actually what brings life. I stopped asking whether it literally happened or not. I have some opinions, but like Steve said, I don't really care because the message is so beautiful. I can live in abundance in the midst of what the rest of the world thinks is scarcity. I can have a Thanksgiving meal, and I'm bringing bread, and that's going to multiply, and it's going to feed everybody. Thoughts on that? Is anyone like really just getting rubbed the wrong way right now? I would love it if you spoke up. How did I get to the place where I didn't care anymore? What I did is I started to really dig into all the different places where the story didn't line up. I had to deconstruct it first. So for me, I'd been told it literally happened. So then what I had to do is I had to go through and totally ruin the story. Once I ruined the story, then I was able to say, wait a second, there's a lot of beauty to this story. And for me, personally, I began picking up all of the pieces that I had just smashed of the stained glass. I picked up all the pieces and I started to reorient them in a way that I thought, this is how the Jews viewed it in the original place. And when I did that for me, the whole thing came alive. But that's not something everyone will enjoy doing. And so maybe even if you're at the place where you need the story to be the story and it to be history, that's cool. But don't forget there's a really beautiful, deep meaning to it. What do you think of that? Yeah, for me, I just had to smash the crap out of the stained glass windows, and I had to rebuild it again. And when I did that, that's where the whole thing, like, for me, really hummed. It just came alive. And here's the truth of it, too, since you asked. I had to do that with God. How many of you, I'm going way off on a tangent, how many of you, your idea of God has shifted over the past couple years? Okay, can I just ask, like, what is your picture of God right now? How do you view God? The divine. I don't even like using the word God, to be honest with you. I think it's been overused and abused. The divine, I like to say that. How do you view the divine? Anybody? Brave enough? I know! Anyone brave enough to say it?
I think I see it more from, I don't know if anybody, the majority of us probably have watched the movie Avatar.
Yeah.
But they relate to this thing called Awa. And Awa is basically, I don't know if you want to call it an entity. You can see it as an entity, but a feeling, a power, a thing that exists that connects everybody, whether through thought or they do it physically and try and get a connection out of it. But I believe God is something. You can say someone if you want. Sometimes my human side pictures him as a person or as a male, or if you're female, you maybe think of a female, but this thing out there that we have an attachment to somehow. If it was at the Big Bang when created, was that God? Maybe. Was it just something that happened? Maybe. But there had to be something, in my mind, there had to be something to create something, and I think God is just that power, that being, that thing that caused creation, and we can't sever that because we are part of that creation. So we have that connection. However we find that connection then becomes up to us. It's not a direct speaking, a direct channel speaking to us, but we can still tap into that. We can still do it because it's inside of us.
Got
And I
it.
can say one last thing, because me, since I blurted out that I don't care, it's not so much I don't care what they're talking about, but like Tony was saying, he finally got me right in that context.
So glad I got you right.
I care about the meaning behind it, It doesn't matter if it really happened with 5,000 people or with 5 people or whatever. That really doesn't matter. I told a joke the other day, and originally it was told as, oh yeah, a rabbi, a pope, and the whatever. And I changed it to fit our work. I said, oh, an officer, a sheriff.
Yeah. Okay, so for you, God has become more of a larger force, the thing behind the thing, the bigger, the deeper mystery, the force that we're all a part of. Okay. Anyone else? Super curious. Yep. Personal. What does that mean, personal? Okay. Got it. Right. Okay, nice. And I notice you're using the pronoun him. Is it a masculine for you? Okay, got it. Nice. Cool. Thank you. Anyone else? Yep, Martha. Okay. Oh, okay. So like the path, okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and Martha's probably the only one in the room that doesn't always agree with their partner and how they view God or the Bible and everything, right? Yeah. Love it. Good. Okay, thank you. Interesting to hear different perspectives, right? Interesting to hear that not all of us see the divine, God, the mystery, the force, the same. And yet we're still able to come together and have this conversation. So, like, yay us. Yeah, really cool. Okay. I don't know why we just went that direction, but let's keep going. So there's another moment, a miraculous moment. Jesus says, throw your net on the other side, right? And what happens when the disciples throw their net on the other side? It fills up, and it fills up so much that what happens? It pulls the boat. And again, I love reading people's perspectives on this. You'll get these people who are, very literal. And they've said, like, in order for that to happen, to capsize a boat, it has to weigh this many tons and this many fish, and no way would they have had a net that would have been able to do blah, 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 blah. Okay, got it. Many people will go back and forth. Well, they didn't even get it right because one gospel writer says it happened at the beginning and one says it happened at the end. Here's the beauty. Again, notice this. You're casting your net on the wrong side. Christianity oftentimes has the symbol of the what? The fish. Go cast your nets. Jesus talks about sharing the gospel message, and he shares it like he does fishing. He uses those analogies. What would that mean to a Jewish community of people who just lost everything? And he's saying, you lost everything. It's time to begin living new again, freely here. Stop looking for a kingdom, a literal physical one. Start living that thing here. Who are you going to share your message with now? Because before it was always on this side. Where are you casting your net now? Isn't that beautiful? Here's my issue with most Christian churches today. They're really great at recruiting more Christians. Baptists are really good at recruiting more Baptists. But their messages are so thin and so narrow that you'd have to be a trout in order to be in that net, and only a trout. But what Jesus is saying is everyone can experience this kind of life, and we can share it with everybody. That means everyone in a room that doesn't view the same similarly can still find a way to live that kind of life right here, right now. Everyone can be caught in that net. Beautiful. And again, I'm sharing all of this. Most of this that I'm sharing is not new. It's not like, oh, Tony's smart. This is all stuff that has come from the rabbinical teachings of people during that time era that were reading these stories. And they're saying, this is why this is beautiful. Rabbi Rashi is another one that you can look up. He did all of this study over this. This is how they viewed it. This is how they viewed the story. Literal or not, whenever I tell my kids these stories, I always, always, always talk about the beauty of the meaning. Because no matter what, my kids can walk away and say, that was the message. You never hear people talking about like Odysseus as literal, do you? Or fighting to tell your kids, it literally happened, now tell me it happened. Well, no, they're saying, here's the meaning behind, here's the moral lesson. When you start to get into that of like, you have to believe exactly how I believe about the story to everyone around you, we lose the beauty behind the story. Maybe? Man, I feel like it's so good that this group is small today as I'm saying this. Okay, good. Here's another one. So there's this moment where Jesus apparently doesn't quite get the miracle right. He finds a blind guy, and they find each other. And Jesus finds that he's blind, and he spits in the dirt, makes a little soupy thing, and puts it over his eyes. Do you remember this story? And then he wipes it, and he says, "Can you see?" And the guy's like, "Not really." Do you remember that? He says, "I can kind of see it. It looks like people, maybe, but it looks like trees walking around." And then Jesus says, okay, I'll do it again. He does it again. And then this time the guy opens his eyes and, now I see. I know, shoot, right? Like, crud, what do we do? That was what my parents would be saying as they read that story. We didn't read this one very much. We would jump to the other ones where like immediate healing, right? What do you do with that one? Like, well, Jesus isn't perfect either. He made mistakes. He's gotta do it again. Do your best. Don't give up, right?
Not only that, that's taking it literally. If you still take it in the context, you can say he gave him, like you can lead a horse to water, but you got to make him drink. Okay. He gave him the tools to see the right way, not literally see, but here, this is the story. This is what I mean by this story. He didn't get the story, so he told him again in a different way, maybe, or in the same way. Oh, now I get it. If you're thinking figuratively.
Right. Yeah, when you get literally, it's like I went to the doctor, and now everything's fuzzy. I can kind of see, but this isn't all that helpful either. I still can't drive. I still can't walk around. I'd be mad at the doctor. Like, well, now I got to go back there and spend another 10 grand, right? Literally, this story makes me frustrated, as I think a lot of people did. Metaphorically, there's some interesting stuff. Here's also what I'm learning to do. Every time you get to one of these stories and it doesn't add up, look at the context. What happened before, what happened after? Because what happened before and what happened after is this. Peter says this, "Who are you?" People walk into Ethos all the time and they're like, "What do you guys believe?" It's like the first thing people will say, "What do you guys believe?" And then they'll ask, "What does Tony believe?" And again, our leaders, what we're learning to say is, I don't know, I haven't talked to him today. I haven't talked to Kim today. We're all growing, changing people. He says, "Jesus, who are you? What do we say we are, Ethos?" When people ask us. Jesus, when people ask, "What do I say you are? The king, the next rabbi, what are you?" And Jesus, it says he then doesn't answer immediately. He just goes and heals this guy. But for some reason, it takes twice. Yeah? Until the guy is able to see. And then after that, the guy sees. And then with Peter, what's going to be interesting is at the end of the story, Peter's going to have a moment where he denies Jesus twice. He doesn't see. And what's going to happen at the very end when Jesus is with him is Jesus is going to be talking, and then he's going to look back at Peter, and Peter finally sees. He sees who he is, and he sees who Jesus is. Anybody with me? Anyone ever have to, like, it took twice? Whatever the thing was. Like, more than twice, yeah. Good. It took a couple times until you finally saw it. I think about, this is going to sound terrible, but I can't think of a better analogy. I thought of dating. Like, I dated a lot of girls. And I remember, like, Danielle's cringing right now because I'm trying not to blow this. I dated a couple girls. And I remember, like, man, that didn't work. And then, like, I would date the same girl, just different. She just looked a little different. But it was basically the same girl. And then that didn't work. And I remember, and then I met Danielle. And I was like, oh, there she is. Is that good? Baby number 4. You have to look twice. Sometimes for our own selves. Again, I grew up in a culture where I was told I have to be humble. I was just talking about this morning. I have to be humble. I have to look at myself as, like, lowly, and I can't ever be fully me and express myself up front and just be. Like, I can't just be. I can't be me. I can't let that thing shine out of me because I have to, like, hold it in a little bit. I have to pretend that. It took years until I started to see it in the mirror again, or maybe for the first time. I had to look twice. And for these people who lost everything, the writer is saying, look back, like, look again. You're looking for hope. You're looking for something that's going to inspire you. You're looking for new life. Look back, because actually it's right there. That's what it looked like. Look again. Whew, this is fun. There's this miracle story, which is one of the weirdest ones. Jesus comes upon a fig tree, and the fig doesn't have figs. And so he curses it to death. Why add that in the story? Like, again, hundreds of things you could be writing about Jesus, all really interesting details. Again, if we're writing history, why include that, right? Like, why would that be important? It'd be like you going into Sprouts and being like, the avocados are bad, boosh, and you step on it and you walk away. You're like, I have to include that in Joel's documentary. Like, what? Like, who cares that Joel's mad about an avocado that isn't ripe? Like, what? Who cares? Here's, again, why this story is interesting. Jesus is about to go into the temple. And in the temple, there is a lot of brokenness, and people are abusing the system. The whole system for them revolved around sacrifices. And so what priests would do, which was really sketchy, you would bring a dove if you didn't have enough money to have a lamb. And you would bring a dove, and the priest would have to inspect your dove. And here's what they would do, these shysters. They would look at the dove, and they'd say, oh, yeah, you know what? This has got blemishes. I'm going to have to take it back there, and we're going to have to give you a new dove. It's going to cost you such and such an amount. What they would do is they just throw that dove into a cage, the same cage they just pulled your new dove from. They were doing that to people. They were abusing the system. And so what they were doing essentially is they were taking something that started with a beautiful image, a beautiful idea, and they shifted it, and they abused the very people that were doing it. And so when Jesus he's going to go into the temple, and it says he's going to flip tables. I remember hearing that, like, see, this is why you should never, like, exchange money in the sanctuary. Well, no, that's stupid. I'm sorry, like, that's not the point. The point was people were being abused. They were being ripped off. And so Jesus comes in there, and he's like, throwing it all over, and he's saying, this is wrong. Like, this is really, really wrong. And that's the point of it. And so think about this. Before he does that, before he says this whole system is corrupt, it's not bearing fruit, what does the story have him do beforehand? Right beforehand. He goes to a fig tree, the fig tree being the symbol for the Jewish people for the temple. The fig tree is the symbol for the temple. And he says, this thing is not bearing fruit anymore. And it's gonna die. What happens when Christianity gets so focused on things that don't bring life anymore? and it stops bearing fruit? What happens to certain religious organizations that are so far behind with human rights, social issues, equality? What happens to those groups when they are hundreds of years behind? They don't bear fruit anymore. That's the point, just saying, if we can't become a group of people who bear real fruit, the thing's dead. It's not going to last. The thing is corrupt. It's going to fall apart. I think today Christianity is really good at worshiping Jesus, isn't it? Like, we've made this really a cool thing. Like, we have great music. We have Hillsong. We have, help me out, Bethel, Chris Tomlin. I'm trying to think of all the others. Yeah, all of it. Like, it's so big, and there's smoke machines, and there's like, come on, and it's great, and it gets you really excited. And at the end of the day, you walk home, and you're like, that was so cool. The Spirit was there. But then you will go the next week, and you'll forget about the concert until you get there the next week. Christianity started not by worshiping Jesus, but by following him. And that's the beauty of every one of these miracles, is it wasn't about the worship, it wasn't about the show, it wasn't about those things, it was about learning to walk in this thing now. If it doesn't bear fruit, how do we begin to bear fruit again, right? How do we learn to be in it and live it fully? How does it bear fruit? Those are the questions they're beginning to ask. So the healing. Scientifically today, if Desi came down with the flu, what would we say is the issue with Desi today? You got a virus, some bacteria. You kissed the wrong boy. I'm just messing with you. Gosh, I'm like I'm being ridiculous today. If one of our members was, if someone was deaf, or let's see, tone deaf, whatever the thing is, if they couldn't hear, or maybe they're mute, what would we say today is going on? With them, scientifically. What's going on? Birth defect, autoimmunity, nerve damage. Okay, interesting. Those are really good words, good descriptions. In that era, if you were deaf or mute, they said you were literally, the devil was taking your tongue and tying it. Or messing, like the devil was doing something to your ears. And so anyone that was allowing that to happen was considered a sinner, evil, and cast out of community. It wasn't a biological thing in your body, it was a spiritual thing which caused you to be out of community. When it was a sickness, if you were sick, whatever the sickness was, it was because you did something wrong. Or maybe if you were doing really well, then it was probably just your parents. So anything that could possibly have happened to you, a leper, whatever the thing was, it's because you did something wrong. Today it's like, well, no, I'm a school teacher and I work with kids who don't wash their hands. And we've learned that. In that era, mental illness, epilepsy, those things, those were demons inside of you. And those people were cast out of community. Anything that looked on the outside as different was considered out, and you pushed those people out. That's how they healed. So Jesus will oftentimes say this: your sins are forgiven. Why? Yeah. It had nothing to do with you're an evil sinner and you're not right with God. It was your community thinks you have sinned and this is why you are in this place. So I'm telling you, you are reinstated into community. Which is why the Pharisees are like, who are you? Right? Like, who is this guy to say that? Let me keep moving. So when you look at every single healing incident, It's all going to be connected to every one of those moments in Isaiah 35. Eyes opened, ears of the deaf unstopped, lame shall walk again, dumb sing for joy. All of these connections you're going to find over and over again. There's these moments, and I'm going to try to move along real quick here, because I want to get to the end. A dead child is raised from the dead, right? Raised from the dead. Often what you'll find is there are connections. Obviously, the story of Elisha and Jesus is almost the exact same one. When you look at the two stories, take time, maybe even today, read the story of Elisha in 2 Kings 4, about when he heals this girl, raises her from the dead. It is the almost exact same story of Jesus. When you look at the son, the widow's son who is raised, it is the almost exact same story as the story of Elijah when he raises someone from the dead. Does that mean it didn't happen? No, but the writers are sharing it because they want you to understand Jesus is what those people, like he embodies the prophets. He embodies the messages. He embodies the identity of who we feel called to be that brings life into the world. It's beautiful. The raising of Lazarus, really interesting story. Many people feel that like Luke borrows this actually from the other stories. John borrows it from Luke. Either way, the whole point is that the message of Jesus is going to bring life once again. This message is the thing that brings life again. It's not the message of Herod. It's not the message of the emperor. It's not the message of the zealots, eye for an eye. It's the message of Jesus. And here's always a question I get asked. Always. Did Jesus raise from the dead? Did he raise from the dead or not? And here's the question. Here's the answer I always give people. Maybe. Maybe not. Here's what I notice Paul says. Paul says, Jesus opens the eyes and raises this new community from death to life again. The purpose of the telling again, let me ask you this. Why would it be important that we tell you Jesus raised again? Did you ever stop to think about that? Why is that important? Okay. Okay, good. For many of us, it's the life after death question. Here's what Jews believed about life after death. Two camps. One of them said, you go to Abraham's bosom. Where's that? If you want to be biblical, Abraham's bosom. The other group said, I don't know. We're going to find out. Someday we'll find out, and to think about it and worry about it is not going to bring life. Christianity, however, did morph and change, and the ideas of heaven and hell and all of that came into being around 300 AD when Rome adopts it. And before you know it, hell looks like Hades, right? The god Hades. Heaven looks like Jesus looking like Zeus with a thunderbolt. This is how it shifts and changes. The idea of the resurrection connected to life after death was not something that the Jewish people were talking about. Especially, what's interesting is after their temple's destroyed. Here's what they're asking, and we know this from all of the writings during that time era. They're saying this: will we rise again as people? Will we rise up as a community again, or is this the end of Judaism? Is this the end of our generation? Did our parents raise us and get us here to the point where now it's over? That's the point. Did it happen or didn't it happen? I will never be up here and tell you what to think. I will always tell you I have my own thoughts, but I also hold those thoughts lightly. And in the end, for me, the beautiful, bigger picture is that no matter what pain and brokenness, especially when you were a Jewish person living in that time, you can and will arise from the ashes when you begin to live the kind of teachings Jesus shared. There is life just on the other side of it. Was that heavy? Can I just say, never in any other place could I say what I just said? Because why? Okay. Yeah, if you don't believe or say what we need you to say, you're out. I need you to reflect the thing that I think so that I can feel good about the thing. Or myself. And let me say, if you're in that place where you need the thing reflected back to you to feel good about yourself, then your identity is revolving around a belief. And now you're on really dangerous ground. Because beliefs change and shift as you grow. But if your identity is grounded in something more substantial, good. But if it's set on a certain belief or a certain doctrine or a certain teaching,
It's weird how religions rely on beliefs or a doctrine, not on faith. And that's what they're supposed to be based on.
right? And typically faith for them is, I have faith in the thing, that doctrine and the belief, rather than faith in what? Okay, good. Faith in the idea that I'm going to be a changing, growing person. I'm going to constantly be evolving, and that there is something bigger going on, and that I can trust that. I can trust that. And whatever the thing is at the end, if it is a light at the end of the tunnel, and I literally get whisked up to some special place on an asteroid, I'm being totally ridiculous now. If there is a literal place where I go where I die and I go right to hell, and I burn for eternity. If there is a place where I die and I wait and then Jesus comes again, pulls me up, and we go up somewhere else, then we come back down. Whatever the thing is, here's the thing. I can't know for certain. And so I just have to wait. I just have to live what I'm living now, knowing that in the end I'll know. I'll know when I know. Yeah. Agreed. How are you guys feeling? Is anyone right now like, I'm ready to explode inside? I don't know. It's safe to say it. Wow, okay. Man. Yep. Yeah. Nice. Right. Yeah. Right. Beautiful. Nice. Yeah. Nice. Beautiful. Life is anxious enough, but I think the beauty of what we're doing is when we look at the actual, when we can find the beauty of the meaning there, something begins to pop. When I can say, I can actually apply the resurrection. I think it's very easy to hear and retell the resurrection, but when I can actually begin to live resurrected life right here, right now, that's when the whole thing pops. Otherwise, it's just a story, right? Whether it's a true story, a historical story, a stretched out story, whatever it is, if it doesn't actually change who I am, then it has no real value. It's just another belief. But if I can learn to apply it and live it, that's where it pops. And that's kind of what I hope this whole series has done for you, is helped say, whether it did or didn't, here's the thing, here's the beauty, here's the meat of it, and here's how I can begin applying it. Here's what people say about Jesus, and I thought this was interesting. I want to give you a chance to try to figure it out. I have the actual answers right here. That's why I'm looking at my phone. Up there, one of those is Hitler. One is Mikhail Gorbachev. One is Martin Luther King Jr. And one is Napoleon. I want you to look up there and try to figure out who said what. who said what? Mikhail Gorbachev, Martin Luther King, Adolf Hitler, and Napoleon. Because it's interesting. We all have something interesting to say about Jesus. But those ideas shift and change. But I'm curious to hear which you think is which. All right, who thinks, let's look at the first one. Jesus was the first socialist, the first to seek a better life for mankind. Who do y'all suppose that was? Okay, Hitler, Gorbachev. Who else? Okay, it was Mikhail Gorbachev. Yeah, interesting. Because he found the life and teachings of Jesus beautiful. You may not have known that. Many people don't realize that because we think, well, if you read the teachings of Jesus, then you must look and act like me. But it's interesting that we all read the teachings of Jesus and we oftentimes come away with something different. Let me ask you this. Bottom one. In boundless love as a Christian and as a man, I read through the passage which tells us how the Lord at last rose in his might and seized the scourge to drive out the temple of brood of vipers and adders. How terrific was his fight for the world. Who was that? Hitler, Napoleon, or Martin Luther King Jr.? MLK, Hitler. Okay, good. Yeah, that was actually Hitler. And it's interesting, Adolf Hitler knew his Bible really, really well. And he actually talked about Jesus in loving ways, and he truly felt he was following the footsteps of Jesus, which is interesting to think about. Yeah, tons of his speeches. All right. Upon force, Jesus Christ founded an empire upon love. And at his hour, millions of men would die for him. Napoleon, yep. And so, of course, Jesus Christ was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness. That was MLK. And so I share that because I think it's so fascinating. We can all talk about these stories. We can all read them. Truth is, we're going to come at it from different angles, different perspectives. When we can all come at it, though, from this perspective of what is the meaning and how do I live it fully, I think we can still find common ground. I think you could get all four of those guys together. This is a huge stretch. But I think you could probably get all four of them together, and I think you would still find connections, and one of them would be the beauty of Jesus. Now, how they viewed Jesus as beautiful and all of that may shift a little bit. But it's interesting. They all read about Jesus. They all had opinions. I'm going to finish up. Jesus says, here's the reason I was there. Here's the reason I was here. It was actually not to tell you what God looks like. It was this. It was that I preach the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns as well, because that is why I was sent. What was the good news? What was the gospel? You can live life more abundantly right here, right now, and into eternity. It happens here, and it moves on. The kingdom of heaven was something he said happens within you, around you, through you. And you don't need a temple to do it. You are, according to Paul, the living, walking, breathing temple now. And you can live it. Beautiful? Every single story, if you can view it through that lens, it pops. And so I want to share this last story with you. I read it the other day, and I thought, yeah, here's the beauty of story. Like, here's why we read these. Here's why, for many of us, the Bible has become our narrative. If you go overseas, it's a different narrative. But here's why the Bible for me and for so many other people, their sacred texts are important. And I just want to read this to you for a moment. Let's see. J.K. Rowling found out her books helped save a baby's life. On the worst night when when our 1-pound daughter was fading in the darkness of her incubator, my husband opened a book and began to read it out loud. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. He needed to say those words. I thought it was strange that he'd chosen the first book in a 7-volume series, a series that totals more than 4,000 pages, for a little girl who probably won't survive the night. How about Goodnight Moon, I offered. That's a good book. Tom saw it all more clearly than I did. He wanted Juniper, born barely viable at 23 weeks gestation, to hear a story about children who could fly. He wanted to read to her about a baby who survived the most powerful evil in the world because his mother stood by his crib and protected him with her life. My husband wanted to initiate our daughter into our tribe. My stepsons, Nat and Sam, grew up reading the books, crisscross applesauce underneath restaurant tables. They played Quidditch on rollerblades and made wands out of chopsticks and string. On their 11th birthdays, they began checking the mailbox for their invitations to Hogwarts, clinging to the hope that it could be real. Rolling stories, along with the Springsteen canon, made up our shared mythology. Now, as Tom held that faded book, the dust jacket long lost, he was reaching out to our daughter with a protective incantation of love and belonging. Stories were invented to conjure meaning from randomness. They give us our history, even our identity. It made no sense that Juniper came crashing into our world 16 weeks early in the size of a kitten. It made no sense that machines could keep her alive or that she could be snatched away so quickly. It made no sense to parent a baby in a plastic box, but that was what we learned to do. Stories are a promise, Tom told me, when he'd had time to think it through. They are a promise that the ending is worth waiting for. Juniper didn't understand a word of the story, of course, but she could tell us by the monitor pinging in her bedside that she loved the parts about Hermione and that she hated the gruff voice of Hagrid and the half-giant. When Tom read to her, she breathed better, held her temperature better, seemed generally more content. Tom read every paragraph in a soothing sing-song voice, and when he stopped, her oxygen levels would plummet and the alarms would blare. "Keep reading," the nurses would shout. He was nearly finished with a book when Juniper had another awful night. We were rushing to the hospital when he started crying at the wheel. "What if she never hears the end of the story?" he said. "What if she never learns how it ends?" 5 years later, Juniper is a wild and joyful kindergartner. And one day this spring, while she was off at school, a large box arrived at our house. The shipping label showed an address from Edinburgh. I waited until Juniper got home to open it. "Is that for me?" she asked. She didn't notice my shaking hands. I hadn't told her that a month or so earlier I'd gotten a Twitter message from J.K. Rowling. She'd said she heard about Juniper. She said she'd cried and that she wanted to send us something. When I saw the message from her, I screamed. Then I tried to seize the moment and tell her what she'd already given us, and I'm sure I didn't capture it. I told her books brought our family together in midnight lines that snaked through Walmart, when we were brought 4 copies so we wouldn't have to share them. In our all-night family readings, we raced each other to finish and then slowed in the last chapters because we couldn't stand for them to end. When Juniper arrived and Tom started reading, those stories helped me see that being a parent wasn't something I might get to do someday. It was something I could do right now, for however long it lasted. They helped Tom and I write the story of our own lives, of who we are in these long, wrenching months. They gave a generation of children the most powerful gift imaginable, the lessons of love and friendship and bravery and decency, the ability to love and place each other and move. That doesn't make sense. To turn the other page. They gave our family its sacred text. They guided us through the dark. Just going to end it there. I think that's the beauty of what stories do for us. They bring us together and they offer hope, challenge, and make us more courageous. And so, however you view the stories, I hope that they help you become a more courageous, more present, more loving person. And in those moments of brokenness and sadness, I hope that they will help lead you to places where you find new life again too. So I hope you enjoyed this whole series, and thanks for letting me read an excerpt from Harry Potter. That was kind of fun. I'm going to end. Joel's going to come on up. And Joel, do you mind just maybe doing 2? Okay, perfect. All right, awesome. I'm going to skip. Are you guys okay? Do you feel we need to do a Q&A, or did we kind of move through that together already? Yeah? I was leaving time for Q&A, but I feel like I want to skip it because I want to hear Joel sing now. Okay, good. I gave you a bunch of stuff to think about, and so just free us now.
Thanks, Pastor. I also want to apologize. This is like no representation of my voice. We had a late gig last night, and don't explain. Anyways, yeah, you guys know we don't have any slides here, but if you guys know these songs, just sing along with us. Sing along with me.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. And pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. And pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. High and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. And pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. When the music fades, all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's of worth that'll bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. Ooh. 'cause it's all about you, Jesus. Thank you.
A friend of mine, he had a neighbor. I'm going to say this real quick, I promise. He had a neighbor that he would walk by their house, and she was this old woman and not very friendly. He'd walk by and just notice that she just kind of didn't even look at him, had kind of a gruff look on her face. And he said as he walked by, every couple days, he'd notice her in the front lawn doing something. And the rumors spread about this woman, how she was mean, probably killed her husband. That's why he wasn't around. They had all these crazy rumors about her. And he said one day he felt impressed that I'm just going to talk to her. So he walked by and he says, "Hello, how you doing?" And she looks up and goes, and looks away. And he thought, oh man, she is evil. She must be evil. Like, she's so mean. So he kept this up. He would see her and he thought, I'm just going to mess with her. So he'd like do that. And she always kind of, or rarely even noticed him. Even when he would yell, "Hello," she wouldn't even look up. So finally one day he thought, I'm gonna get in her face. I'm gonna just make her see me. So as he's walking by, he stopped right in front of her and she looks up and he says, "Hi." And she goes, "What?" She like sticks, "What? I never wear my hearing aid." "What?" And he feels like a total ass. And he starts talking to her. And for the first time in years, the woman becomes a human being. And what happened is, he said he started to ask her more and more questions every time he'd go on these walks. He found out she was one of the few surviving Holocaust survivors. He began asking her more and more questions about this experience when she was this little girl. And he said he began to understand everyone has a story. Everyone has something beautiful to share if we're just willing to stop and ask. And so every week we try to tell you, or we try to give you something to walk away with. And here's what I hope you'll walk away with, is that you have people that you're surrounded by every day, every week. And rarely do we ask them meaningful questions. Rarely do we ask their side of the story, their story. We're so quick to share our own, to put our Instagram selfie up. What if the people around you, you actually start asking them the questions, start asking them the story? And it usually, psychologically, it takes three questions until you finally get under like surface. 3 questions. Try to find those people around you. Ask 3 questions. Seem interested in them. And what you'll find is their story is so beautiful, so interesting. And what you'll also find is your story is very similar to theirs. And before you know it, we begin sharing story and we begin finding more and more meaning together. The stranger is no longer a stranger. We realize we are all connected. Close your eyes. God, we're thankful, so thankful that we are here together sharing stories. Stories can do so much more than just simple words of advice, scientific fact, historical knowledge. Stories are the things that weave us and bring us together. So we want to ask that we'll have many, many opportunities where we can begin sharing our stories and hearing others' stories. And when we do that, may that bring us together. May it bring together people who just don't ever seem to see eye to eye. May those stories be the things that connect us all. Amen. Everyone, thanks so much for coming again, and make sure to give Joel lots of love. Look him up on wherever he is, Spotify, wherever. Swells. Awesome. All right, everybody. And yes. Oh, right. We didn't take up donations because that's what I'm really terrible at doing. There's little jars in front of you. We would really love it if you would consider giving whatever you can to those jars. It kind of helps us be able to pay for this space, amongst other things. So as the music starts playing, please consider giving in those little donation jars. And also at the end of the month, we're doing a bowling party. And so see Kim or Christy if you're interested. It's the 30th. The 30th from 5 to 8:30. Westminster Lanes. So make sure to talk to Christy. And if you're interested in that, it's going to be a lot of fun. We usually get pizza, drinks, and just bowl for a long time. So talk to her. Anyways, as the music starts, we hope you guys have a great day. And with those you love, make sure, ask those 3 questions. See how deep you can go.